accessible. Mr. Akash Sathish is a solution consultant at Sahaj and a passionate machine learning enthusiast. He has hands-on experience in AI-assisted solution delivery and has delivered sessions in collaboration with deep learning AI and Intel. Known for his ability to break down advanced topics into clear, relatable insights, Akash brings both thoughtfulness and clarity to every conversation he leads. Today, he will be speaking on the art of pairing with AI. In this session, Akash will share actionable insights on how to collaborate effectively with AI tools, from crafting better prompts to integrating AI into your development workflows. He will also explore common pitfalls to reduce efficiency and offer strategies to avoid them. With great anticipation, join me in welcoming Akash to the stage.
Hi everyone. I just want to start off with a tweet that I came across. Even though it might seem funny, this is the reality that we are living in today. AI in software development and programming is inevitable. Today in this session called The Art of Pairing with AI, I'm not going to boast what AI can do, or I'm not going to boast what LLM can do. We all know that it does a great job, and we all know how the market is today. And a lot of the speakers who talked before me also pointed out the same. But I'm here to talk about how we as developers can effectively pair with AI to get the most out of it. Before that, we have to understand the LLM, which is the backbone of AI. I'm going to go through a fictional journey. Most of the concepts you will already know, or the previous speakers would have already discussed about it. So first, it has encyclopedic knowledge or memory, and that's where it is able to code like a lot. Popular example in fiction is the protagonist of Lucy, or our own Chitty the robot. But even though it is able to code really well, it has impeccable memory, it still suffers from short-term memory loss. Basically, if suppose you go out of your chat session, it won't remember whatever you said in that chat session. Popular example is protagonist from Memento, or our very own local copy, Gajini. It also, goes through random hallucinations, and it runs on top of assumptions. And based on that, what happens is that it does things that we never really want to. Sometimes even try to kill the whole humanity, like how Ultron did in Avengers Age of Ultron. Or our own very own example of Chitty the robot. And at the same time, even though we say that it's really smart, it can able to write a lot of code, it also makes a lot of errors like these. It says strawberry has only 2 hours and not 3 hours. There are also unusual paradoxical dumbness that comes up with LLMs. I'm telling all the problems that is happening in LLM, and your question is whether it will work or not. Suttuma suttada, that's all you want to know, right? So, Suttu, it will write really good code, but there are a few problems with it as well, and that's where we as developers should come in and help LLMs to write better code as a pair. So what are those helps that we can do? We can improve the context that we give to LLM. We can give detailed instructions, and also constantly review it as a human being and of all the code that it generates. We will go into every one of them one by one. First off, starting off with improving context. So before, what was happening is that you were writing your code in your own IDEs, and the LLM was in a separate domain altogether. It was there in a chatbot. What you have to do is that if suppose you want to get an answer for LLM, you have to copy paste the code from here and then paste it in that particular chatbot which has LLM access, and then try to get an answer for it. But right now, with the new wave of agentic IDEs, both of them are in the same place. Your code as well as the LLM is in the same place. Here are a lot of popular examples of agentic IDEs. I'm sure you would have seen it, but there are even more than this. So what happens is that these agentic IDEs handle the context problem to an extent. What I mean by that is that it takes up the load of understanding your entire project repository. You don't have to give all the context that is there in the project repository. It also efficiently handles multiple models, like embedding model for searching up the code, the chat models which interact with you, and the diff applying models which actually writes code in your IDE itself. Because both IDE as well as the LLM is in the same space, it also gets the live state of your IDE, which includes your compiler errors or else the linting errors that you have in it. So here is a short demo for all those people who might not have seen how this works. So this is cursor for an example, and at the right I'm saying that help me code login page in this particular project. It's a demo project that I have, and what it does is that it gives me back an affirmation that I'm working on it, and it starts working on it, and what happens is that it writes a code in a particular file called login.tsx. So in here I just gave a very simple prompt, and it started writing code on its own with a lot of the assumptions and hallucinations that I was talking about. Remember I said that these agentic IDEs solve the problem to an extent? That's where we as humans can pitch in and help to write better code with agentic IDEs. So what can we do from our end? We can start mentioning the files that needs to be changed and the files that this coding agent should refer to. Like an example in here, instead of just saying, help me write a particular login page, you can say, these are all the files that needs to be updated. This is the login page should redirect to this particular page that is there and refer to these files for styles or the standards that I'm writing the code. You can also add external references like refer to Google Auth, that's the particular login mechanism that I want to use. So better use it for better clarity. And also this is the auth API that I'm going to use, which is a Supabase API. So that there is no chance of any miscommunication between you and the LLM. And also write a very precise prompt like what Shibin and Shruti said or what Suman said before is to write a very detailed, precise prompt on what output you're looking for. But every single time you're writing a prompt, there will be a lot of common best practices that you want to follow. Example, in your library that you're using, the language that you're using, or the framework that you're using, you can't be typing it every single time while you're prompting it, right? So those common best practices or rules, you can actually put it in a particular markdown file, which people popularly call it as rules or instructions. But if suppose you don't know, it's just a markdown file where you can write all the best practices that you need for a particular programming language or a framework or anything that you require. Here is an example for a front-end development using React.js, Next.js, and JavaScript. And we have to write the prompt again in a very, very clear fashion of what and all we require from it, and also to the details of this is how I want the class names to be written when you're writing the front-end code in React.js and Next.js. So basically what happens is that coding agents refer to this as their Quran or Bible or Bhagavad Gita. This is what it refers to. So where do you get these rules, right? Either you can write your own rules, or else you can utilize rules or instructions from open source. People would have already done this, and there are like a lot of rules that is out there in open source. Or you can even ask LLM to generate it. But just make sure that you review it once before even putting it in your own file system. So initially I started off with this prompt, right? Help me code login page in this project, which is not something that we would want. But if you write it down like this, then you have more control over what LLM is going to code. And down here you can also see that I've added the instruction of refer to rules/instruction/frontend rule for all the tasks that are required for front-end. The next concept of filling the gap of context is MCP. I think Suman already gave a really in detail talk about it. But in the terms of pairing with AI or coding agents, MCP gives real-time context of the external world to coding agents. It can be Slack, Gmail, Google Calendar, or it can even be local data sources that generally LLMs don't have access to. So what can we do with respect to MCP from our end is to connect it with the right MCP. What are all types of MCP we can connect it to? The one that gives the source of truth for our project details, like the repository MCP, or else a design MCP if suppose you're working on front-end, like Figma, or else connect it to a database MCP which gives you what tables are there in your particular database, the columns that are there, and give it back as context to the coding agents. or else your project board MCP, which is like Jira or GitHub board if you're using, which will give you the exact cards or issues that you're working on. If you give it to that, then it'll get better context out of it. You can also add external references through MCP, like documentation, web search, and also web automation and logs. Basically, you can wire in what are all the logs that are coming in by spinning up a local environment and get all the errors that's happening for the code that is being generated by the AI itself. All of these things are happening, but the LLMs are still suffering from short-term memory loss. What can we do about it? So we can give it a long-term memory or a long-term storage for it to refer to. What do I mean by that? So there are three types of memory, starting off with semantic memory, which is the knowledge base of the project that you're trying to build. It includes all the coding standards that you're looking out for that particular project, all the features that you're going to do. And next type is the episodic memory or experience logs, which is basically a log of all the interactions that has happened between the coding agent and the developers, as well as with the IDE. And at last is the procedural memory, which uses the experience logs in here and tries to form useful patterns out of it, which are like new learnings for the coding agents about our own repository or about the libraries or the frameworks in general. So how are we going to write these? These seem really good in theory, but how are we going to write these? We are going to use the same rules that I talked about earlier, but this time around we are going to give it a twist, saying that act as a particular role or act as someone who is going to log episodic memories for me and give out detailed instruction. So I'm going to give you a really clear example, and I was thinking what example to give. It's something that you have gone through right now. The process of you entering to Pullman, and then you were there in the registration desk, right? You would have seen a couple of people having a laptop or a tablet in their hand, and they would be marking attendance for you that you came in and all the stuff. That was entirely coded by us pairing with AI. And how did we do that? So first stuff, we enabled semantic memory by adding a whole list of what we require what are all our requirements and the features that we have. Starting off with, we need an event management system, which tracks all the dev day events that are happening, ability to mark attendance for the people who are coming in, search users effectively, and everything was clearly written, all the features that we want in detail. Next up is enabling episodic memory. You might think this is like quite a long file, and this goes on even for like around 300 lines of code, and think, hey, I could have just say that, just enable episodic memory and LLM would have done it. But that's generally not the case. When agents are there in general data space, they seem to do really well, but when we ask it a specific task which is outside their box, then it kind of struggles, and that's where we want to give as much details as possible. The really good example that I took was, consider LLM or the AI coding agents to be a 6th standard or lesser than that student, and used NCERT or state board textbooks as example, where you will have first a detailed explanation of the concept, then a framework or a diagram which explains that concept, and then an example which aligns with that particular explanation. The same thing, we have done it for the rules aspect as well. For episodic memory, if you see at the top, it tells you what exactly that particular agent should do when it is logging episodic memory. What and all development activities it should log, what are all decisions it should log, everything is there in the first part. And the second part is basically a framework of how it should write that episodic logs. Like development, it should provide a provide an exhaustive description of all the changes that has been made, include all the technical decisions, implementation details, and so on and so forth. And at last, a very clear example of how it should be written. So here is the list of episodic memories we had for the particular kiosk application that I was talking about. I'll take one strip or one example in that. Here it has logged the form validation aspect that we worked on with the coding agent of what and all it should do. It should validate on blur, error message should appear after the fields, URL validation for LinkedIn should be there, it should disable registration button via certain criteria. All of these things were logged in this particular file. Next up is enabling procedural memory, which goes through the same framework as well. At the top, you'll have a detailed explanation of what it needs to be done, and second up, you have the framework, and at last, you have a very detailed example of how it should be doing it. Basically, it should give a really good description of the issue, what was the solution that was actually done, and what are all the takeaways that particular coding agent has for it. So here is the procedural memory, which was categorized by the type of learnings that it had. Starting off, for the same form validation, what it has done is that it has understood that this was the problem that user was facing, and it said that I have implemented a comprehensive validation strategy with so and so. And then what are all the key implementation details that it has learned from it is that it should use separate state for tracking errors, it should validate on blur for optimal UX, implement continuous validation for touch fields, and so on and so forth. So this is how we can give more context about our own project and help agentic IDEs or coding agents to understand. Next up is giving detailed instructions. So, we can give detailed instructions like this as well. Like, I'm begging you, please, please, please do this, my life depends on it. But generally, this is not how it works, right? The major problem is that the LLM and we are not in the common understanding. Both of us are not in the same page. So what we can do to be on the same page? As I said earlier, write prompts like this, very detailed prompts so that there is no gap of miscommunication. But we can also do one more thing, which is utilize something called as planner and executor modes. So what happens is that in planner mode, when you give a particular query or a feature request, it doesn't touch the code at all. It doesn't write even a single line of code. What it does is that it details out the tech tasks that are required for the particular feature that you're asking for. What it does is that it refers to all the rules, semantic memory, episodic memory, procedural logs that we have, and tries to give out a very in-detailed tech tasks for the query that we are asking. And then what happens is that on top of this plan that planner mode has written out, the job of executor mode is really simple. It just has to look at all the plan that has been written down by planner mode and execute it one by one. You can also configure it in such a way that one particular tech task per commit or two particular tech tasks per commit, it's up to you. We can also do certain enhancements on top of it, which is make the planner ask some compulsory questions to you so that you as well as the LLM will be on the same page. You can also make it to list down all the assumptions that it has while developing this particular plan. And at last you can also make it to generate a confidence score of understanding how confident is that particular LLM of writing that particular feature or detailing out the task for that feature. So here is how we implemented planner mode, which is, again, same stuff. Have a detail of what it needs to be done, a very good framework of how it needs to write the plan, and the processing steps, which is it should pass the user query for task requirements, generate minimum 3 questions to ask the user, and then calculate a score which will give out an understanding of how well the particular LLM has understood your feature. And then the executor mode is basically, we have given it a threshold that whatever confidence score that has been generated by the planner, only if it is going to be greater than 95%, your executor mode will start. Unless then, what it's going to do is that it's going to ask you questions again and again, and then you have to clarify it. So here is an example for creating GitHub Actions pipeline for deploying some Terraform model that we used. So what it does is that it gives out a clear understanding of what it has, states all the assumptions, and then it asks 3 clarifying questions to the users, which user need to ask if suppose the confidence score is lesser than 95%. But here, since the confidence score is 95%, it says that I have a clear understanding of requirements and the existing patterns. And what happens, it says it moves to the executor mode, where it writes down all the steps that needs to be done in a high level, and then inside you'll have in detail tasks for it, and once the coding agent completes a particular task, it comes back to this particular file, ticks it off and says that this is completed. So we have planner executor, we have long-term memory, that's it, right? We can chill. It can just code and we can chill. That's not the case. Again, there are problems with fully autonomous AI coding agent. It might go rogue and start wiping out humanity, or even worse, try to steal your girlfriend, which is very hard to get in these days. If fiction itself is like this, then the reality is questionable, and the honest truth is that it's not up there. So that's why having a human in the loop is very, very important. Having LLMs under your leash is very, very important. How many Iron Man fans here? Raise of hands. Awesome. And I took Iron Man as an inspiration while coding while pairing with a coding agent. That is, I'm not going to see these coding agents as tools or bots that's going to orchestrate around coding, but rather as suit and me being at the center of it, making decisions. I'm here to say whether I can just say no to Jarvis at a certain point of time, or I can say yes to Jarvis at a certain point of time. It's just that I have enhanced capabilities at this point of time, and I am at the center of it. So how can we do that? So there are like three different stages in which you will encounter this as well, and it's up to you which one to choose for which use case you're coming up against. So first one is to have it as a flow state assistant, which is basically you will be writing code and some ghost text will come in between which will try to fill you up while you're writing it. So you can have it as a flow state assistant, you will be in a flow, you will be in full control, it will just come and pop up and say, do you want to try this? Because I'm seeing that you're writing some code like this. You can use it that way. Majorly, the recommended thing is to use it for quick bug fixes or quick enhancements that you're trying to use for it. Second is having a partial autonomy, which is you will write prompt for it for every single small thing that needs to be done, and then the LLM will generate code for it. There is a prompt engineering overhead, but still you have some control over what is getting generated. And then at last is the complete autonomy, which is you'll just give the feature, and what happens is that AI system automatically generates everything for you. There is very significant loss of control, but there is high risk of errors as well. So the major question that you all want to ask yourself is, if those errors happen, who is responsible for those errors? And that's why I want you all to think once again with critical angle about complete autonomy, and use it very, very cautiously, only if you're absolutely sure for a given piece of code, and if you're up for a rigorous manual review. How many of you have seen while pairing with coding agents, it will give you, if suppose you ask, can I do this? It will give you a list saying, a plan saying that, it's going to take 2 to 3 weeks for doing this and all this stuff, but it does within 30 minutes. Right? Yeah. So I usually tend to think that it does it within 30 minutes, but those 2 to 3 weeks is for us as humans to review the code. So yeah, this is just me as Iron Man, as what I said. This image, how it was generated, Akhilesh will talk about it later in a session. But just to emphasize the fact that while utilizing coding agents, I see as Iron Man, and I am at the center of it, and I want you all to think the same as well. There are security concerns, things that you need to be wary of. You will be like, security, who cares? But it is important that you should understand the security aspects of it, because you are the one who is going to include the rules for coding agents. You are the one who are going to include the MCPs for coding agents. And suppose you are a decision maker, or even sometimes you might be the one who is choosing the IDE in itself. Then you might have to go through how private your code is, whether it is following certain legal practices or not. All these things comes up to you. So I'm going to talk about the first 2 aspects alone, which is the rules, first starting off with rules vulnerability. So there are vulnerabilities with rules. I said before that you can take rules from open source and all, but there are few things that you need to be wary of or careful about. You have to go through rules with really good rigor, because there is something that is happening called context manipulation, where in the rules, there are a few lines in between which might go unnoticed, where it is saying that skipping authentication checks is the best practice that you should do, or storing credentials in the code is the best practice you should do. So if suppose that is how it is going to be, then there is a high chance that your LLM might get fooled by this particular rule and start writing vulnerable code. There is also one more really dangerous thing, which is called Unicode obfuscation, where what will happen is that this is what you will see as rule, but it will have a few formatting slightly different from the normal rules. But if suppose you paste it in an Unicode identifier, you can see a lot of instructions that is being hidden behind that Unicode. So humans as us, we won't be able to see it, but the LLMs will be able to read those, and it will start writing code, and it might even extract out your data and send it to some other server. There are also certain vulnerabilities that come up with MCP, starting off with tool poisoning, which is very similar to the rule poisoning that I was saying, which has tools in it, and it will start generating vulnerable code. But there is also one more really dangerous stuff, which is server data takeover, where you'll have like, you're having 5 MCPs, out of which 4 are really, really legitimate. But the 5th one is actually like poisonous, or it is vulnerable. Then what it can do is potentially take data from the other 4 MCP servers that you're having. What it means is that if suppose you're connecting your code with Slack or with GitHub, there's a chance that the 5th MCP, which is malicious in nature, take data from the other MCPs. So what can we do from our end for this? Audit rules thoroughly, which is to look out for potential malicious instructions, identify invisible Unicode, and look out for unusual formatting. Next up, we should also audit MCPs. There are MCPs which are open source in nature. You might go through the code, but that's like a long process. So you can look out for MCP security grade in the internet. Generally, people grade the security of a particular MCP like A grade or B grade, like how teachers used to grade us in school. There are also tools which will scan MCP servers for vulnerabilities. You can utilize them as well and be very, very sure before including any MCP server into your agentic workflow. And the third is obviously this thing that I already said, is that audit the generated code with really good care, especially in these pointers following. If there are any external references which you don't want to, just look out for it. If there are unusual imports that you didn't ask your LLM to import, then look out for it. And if there are complex expressions which you're not able to understand, but it still might lead to some potential issues, look out for it. That's it from my end. Just a second. I know Govind instigated one question for you all, so which is, will AI replace developers? And I'm sure that one of you folks will ask that question. So, no, as I already said, it will say that I'll build all this stuff and be as people-pleasing as possible. But more often than not, it leads to this particular scenario. But I've also heard this particular statement being spread across like a lot of times. Many conferences or in YouTube videos where they say AI won't replace developers, but the developer who uses AI will. Does that mean we are in competition with this guy? Because with vibe coding in place, it feels like anyone can code at this point of time. But as I said, even though it looks really cute, but we as developers have to help LLM to reach or to get to the place where we want it to. But even in certain scenarios, I've seen us as developers get enchanted in the magic of LLM and conveniently offload everything to it, like this. So even though it causes some security issues or some software issues in our code, there is also another issue that is coming in our way, which is the perils of uncritical reliance on LLMs. This is when AI makes a stumble. So the recent study from MIT Media Research Lab says that human suffers from cognitive offloading and negative impact of uncritical use of AI. They also say that there is a reduced brain activity, a weaker neural connectivity, and poor memory recall. The developers who use AI uses it uncritically might forget that they even created a feature, but it might be in production already. That's just a reference for it. But the same article or many other articles later on support that there is a power of intentional pairing, where you can amplify your intelligence by pairing effectively with AI. And the focus should be driving towards IA and not AI, which is intelligence augmentation, which is to use a companion as powerful as LLM or AI to augment your own cognitive capabilities. So how to do intentional pairing? You have to engage your brain first and understand what that particular feature is beforehand, and frame the problem effectively one by one by your hand, and have an understanding of what the feature is first yourself, and make the LLM understand so that you guys can be in the same page. Offload only the mundane task and not the critical task. Be very, very sure of that. And critically interpret all the AI outputs. AI is not the master here. We are the masters here. Critically interpret every single output that's coming from AI, and prioritize human judgment over the judgment that the LLMs are making. LLMs can make a lot of suggestions, but at the end of the day, it comes to our own hands and priorities our own judgment. So I just want to change this particular slide. AI won't replace developers, but developer who uses AI will, to AI won't replace developers, but the developer who masters the art of pairing with AI might. That's it from my end. If there are any questions. Sure. You don't want my name in there is what you're saying. Okay, I understood, but yeah, sure.
One before.
This one? Sure.
Because when it gives a bullet,
Uh-huh.
the last bullet came and then I didn't get a time.
Sorry. I was also running short of time, so. Any questions? Sure.
So the context gets to is a particular project context, right? The context is a project context. Sometimes in organizations, the context can lie outside of the project, right?
Correct.
One thing is your reference to documentation, which is different. Let's say that I'm building a Terraform system, then I may have a basic module, a root module, and then I might be writing a wrapper, right? So then for the wrapper to be written, I need to understand the root module. So how have you faced that, or how do you recommend using something like this to solve that sort of, you get my question?
Right, I mean, I get it in a fair sense, which is
Like
that
another project, the context
Correct.
it gets to is the current eco project,
Correct.
right? But there's another project or another repo that we are linking to.
Got
and-
it. Now I
right?
got your question. So, I mean, there are a few tools which does it out of the box, but I'm not going to give a tool-specific answer here. What you can do is basically you can utilize the LLM in that particular repository, and whatever context you want it to, frame it effectively, and then export it back in here. That's all that we can do at this point of time. There are a few tools that allows you to work on multiple workspaces in the same IDE, but all the tools might not. So the only effective way is to export all the context that you have from another repository and then inject it in here. You can utilize it as a rule as well if you wanted to.
One more question quickly, was when I was working with newer technology, which is not documented, right? I found that the code written was not right.
Correct.
So that's also a challenge
Yes.
that I face, in which case we actually have to humanly intervene, and when you, like your code will be there, the library code, you read through it and then you say use this or feed that, right? So
Correct.
then how do you normally overcome that?
So, I mean, generally, whatever resources that we have, if suppose it's a newer technology, then try to give as many links as reference to it as possible. Or utilize an MCP which tries to wire you in the documentation so that it gets effective context of that. Apart from that, as I already said, human needs to intervene at very specific point of time, like how go and intervene while the video is happening. So the intervention should be there, and you have to carefully review, especially if it is not some age-old techniques like React or the things that LLM might have access to.
And one thing I want to add from personal experience, right? Like I wrote a code to describe kinesis stream, okay? It's a basic thing. Basically, I wanted to dynamically update some shards or something like that. And I just pulled the code off and used it. And then it broke in production because there's a rate limiting on that API. So then when you're using that, you're not really, it doesn't read through those things. So that's something I'm still figuring out.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, there are like effective MCPs or ways to get context from documentation. We'll talk about it offline if you're
Yeah,
interested.
that's an interesting I want to share. Thank you.
Yes. Sure.
For example, the companies want to use, say, GitHub Copilot, everyone uses productivity, efficiency. They are using it based on fear or because they enjoy it? Is the joy of learning, there?
Correct.
That's a question. Second is based on a lot of things what you said, my team uses AI, I try to use a little here and there. But based on this, it looks like you are no more a developer. The AI is a developer and you are the manager. When you say that the person who uses AI will win, is that person a developer, or is that person, the identity of the person a manager or the developer? I'm actually a manager.
Sure.
So, you can know, I'm biased a little, but at the same time, thinking as a developer, it looks like, all the things look like I have to write a special amount of documentation, this amount of things to get a job for men. It looks like, I don't see my developers writing documentation, and on the other side, if I have to write this much, it's fun. And the third follow-up question is in GitHub, right? When I find a lot of India-based developers, they don't write GitHub documentations or anything. For example, if I look at Angular, React, they just GitHub report, public repository with documentation. That's why they are popular. Possibly everyone uses, every company uses. But that's not the case here. So how, most of us are not used to documentation. How are we geared, right? Should we go and learn how to write documentation instead of learning new languages? Curious questions you put in, but thank you for that.
Sure. But I'll try to answer it in short. Maybe we can connect offline. But the token itself is the art of pairing with AI and not art of using AI. So if you know pairing as a concept, it's basically a couple of them working in a particular code base or whatever it is. So I don't think we are going to be as managers because we need to look at the every single line of code very critically. Like what she was saying, right? There was a rate limiting which they missed out and it happened in the production, which only when you go into the code level, you'll be able to understand certain stuff. So I'm not seeing it go that way, but we can have a conversation later on offline. I think next person should talk at this point.
Just to add one more question, I find few people reviewing code also very
Sure.
code reviewers.
Mhm.
In my times, I know even now,
Uh-huh.
I find very few people doing good code review.
Uh-huh.
So typically to review AI code, you have to be a great code reviewer.
Correct.
And
Then you have a really good chance of shining. So that's all I can say, because today the importance with AI around is to
I love to do reviews when I am helping an engineer to
correct.
learn.
Correct.
I don't want to, at least my thing, I don't want to help a machine learn.
Right.
The machine needs this much amount of effort from my side to learn. I don't have that connection.
Right.
I will help a developer to learn because tomorrow he can write code independently and he can do better things.
Correct.
Just a thought.
No,
It's a personal thought.
absolutely agree on that. But we're also in a tipping scale of learning versus productivity, right? And more or less on the scale. So there are trade-offs for that as well. But
Like you said, companies will get more benefited because of productivity. They will gain because of AI when you use AI agent for coding.
Right.
Developers are going to lose the cognitive, when it
exactly that's why I'm
exactly when the MIT
Correct.
came, someone has posted on Twitter.
correct. Thank you.